Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. This today is the book launch of Mr. Bhaskar, and I think we have a great panel between Radhika and Dilip here. My job is to ensure that I'm merely a catalyst, which is to ensure that good conversations happen and bad ones are killed. Uh, and I'm quite ruthless at doing that. So one suggestion, all of you who are back, if you can come in front. There is no back seat here. Come, you can just, some seats are empty. आ जाओ यार, शर्माओ मत, आ जाओ. Pardon? Okay. So once again, thank you and good evening. This book called Game India, 7 Strategic Advantages That Can Steer India to Wealth is one of, on the surface, when you see it in the bookshop, you will think this is just one more book talking about India, what it can do, strategic, 7 ways, 10 types, and 5 things to do, etc., etc. But this is not that sort of a book at all. This book has gone into each of those 7, what he calls strategic advantages in fair to great detail. Some of the details are absolutely brilliant, particularly those in the tables and those graphs that you've made out there. Each of the 7, I'll just read out those 7, which is solar power, coastline and waterways, milk, agriculture, population, innovation. Each of these, he has approached each of these subjects coming from sometimes a global, sometimes almost a philosophical view, and then he enters and leads you into the topic. I have a lot to say, but I think I'll allow the panelists to get on with their work. We have about 1.5 hours, so maybe 10-15 minutes, Mr. Bhaskar, you can just introduce the book. Maybe even that's too long. And then I'll we'll give it to Dilip and to Radhika. And then what I would like is for this, for the 3 panelists here, to ensure that some provocative questions are asked in the minds of those who are present here. And I think each of you who is present here and who has come for a book release of this kind would have some ideas of his or her own in terms of what it sees the advantage of India, where it is headed, what is the cynicism behind it, what are the challenges, hurdles, opportunities, etc. So what I would like is a definitive greater engagement with the people here, with the audience, which the panelists can answer, failing which we will have a nice conversation like your thalis over here. So over to you, Bhaskar Sahab.
Thank you, Gautam. Thank you, Gautam. The genesis of this book goes back a few decades. And it goes back to discussions with some very close friends of mine, Shardul's here, where we used to debate issues related to law, order, the way businesses should be structured. It goes back to discussions that I used to have with Dilip Cherian, who was formerly a colleague of mine when I was at Business India. And over the years, we've discussed things off and on in a variety of ways. It also goes back to the fact that in the last 2 decades or 3 decades, I've been focusing on policy. And when you write as a journalist, you have little snippets here and there. I write an article, forget about it, it remains shelved somewhere or the other. Then you go into some other topic, then you go into some other topic. And one very fine day, all these little pieces start coalescing and forming a pattern. And you realize that there is a pattern which India is missing. And that is how I began looking at the pattern called India. And I realized that India has really speaking only 3 advantages. The number of people it has, lots of sunshine, and the coastline and rivers. In each one of these sectors, we forgot to look at the strategic advantages India had. One person who made me understand strategic advantage was Varghese Kurian, and I devoted a few pages to him for 2 reasons. One, because he taught me what strategic advantage was. And the second, because his role of agricultural development and farmer prosperity is even today the most sustainable way of making sure the farmers make money. What did Kurian do? Kurian only made sure that the market prices wouldn't collapse and the farmer would get a stability of prices. When the farmer gets stability, you keep on producing more and more. And Kurian realized that with the large number of people we have, it should be production by the masses and not mass production, where the farmer's income becomes as profit. So you don't separate profit and income, you combine both of them. And he showed a way to climb up the industrial scale and become the world's largest producer without sacrificing wealth for the smallest family in the village. That is what I liked about Kurian. Unfortunately, the government of India did not treat him with the respect he deserves. And that goes for all governments. One reason could be that Kurian did not care for the government, he did not care for politicians, and he had contempt for bureaucrats. And he did not want bureaucracy to interfere with the farmers. Again, a mistake that the government has done. Today, the farmer gets only 10% of the market price of his produce on an average, while Kurian made sure that he started with 50% and today the farmer, in his form of cooperatives, gets about 80%. In some years, he gets 85%. So that is why the Kurian model becomes relevant. The Kurian model also becomes relevant because India has the largest population of cows. It has the second largest population of people. And when you have lots of people, you have the potential for lots of dung and excreta. Methanation should have been the next possible alternative, both for excreta and for natural waste, forest waste, agro waste. Our calculations show that if you harnessed methane, we would not have a balance of payment at all, we'd be foreign exchange surplus in India. So when you talk about a balance of payment crisis, that crisis is also government made because it's forgotten of policies. The third thing that I talked about is solar. There was a German called Hermann Scheer, and I've written about him, who pushed Germany into rooftop solar and created. When you have to phone call, can you go outside and make the phone call? Irrespective. It disturbs me. When Hermann Scheer said that if you can give solar even 1% of the subsidies oil and gas have got, you could transform the world. He promoted solar in a way nobody else had done, especially rooftop solar, and Germany became a powerhouse of solar power. But what he discovered accidentally, this was not planned. In 8 years' time, I found that Germany employed more people in the rooftop solar segment than even the engineering and the automobile sectors, which was the backbone of Germany. India has more sunlight. India has more people, so more houses. Hence, it has more rooftops. And we went to a large solar farms and saw rooftop solar. And the reason was very simple. The state had a vested interest in promoting grids when it should have promoted decentralized clusters. Fortunately, by accident, India will have no option but to go the rooftop solar way in decentralized clusters, because at least 3 state governments are going to go bankrupt because they can't pay the power bills. So it is because of a crisis that you'll have a transformation in India. The last was waterways. One, because waterways is the cheapest form of transportation, we forgot that. For a variety of reasons which I explain in the book. It's only now in the last 5 years that you're focused on waterways, coastal transportation, and I think that change is coming. So we're seeing a change taking place in waterways. We will see a change taking place in the next 6 months in solar. Methanation, we are still going slow. The petrol lobby is very strong, but it will come. It will come. If India harnesses these strategies, India will be not only foreign exchange surplus, but for example, rooftop solar. Our calculations show you can create 80 million jobs within 2 years' time. Now that's a phenomenal number. India needs 12 million jobs every year. You got 5 years job profile created. You can solve that. So this book was on what India can do. Short and simple.
Thanks, Mr. Bhaskar. In fact, this 83 million jobs that you talk about on page 67 is one of the most fascinating discovery which I think every potential prime ministerial candidate should read. But isn't it over optimistic on what is the basis of I know the mathematical basis, but like, do you really think this kind of job opportunities, the money to finance the people who takes those jobs, it truly exists?
Okay, let me give you an example which happened after I wrote the book. 2 months ago, in the month of February, I'd gone to Tripura. I spent about 10 days there. Like all BJP states, the government instructed BJP states to make sure that power reached all villages, every household. And Tripura did its homework. Biplab Kumar Dev in a way is like Lalu Prasad Yadav. He can appear like a buffoon, but he's got a very sharp mind. And don't underestimate Lalu Prasad Yadav. Don't underestimate Biplab Kumar Dev. That guy did his homework, got the state electricity boards, and they found that if you provided grid connection to all the villages, you would still have about 50,000 houses in the hills which were inaccessible. So he went back to R.K. Singh and told him, look, I can't reach them. It's too expensive, and by the time we reach them, the wires will get stolen. Don't do that. And the government said, no, but we don't have a budget for solar. You better stick to grid power. He said, no, I need solar there because that's the only way the farmer will have sustainable power year after year. The state said, the central government said, no, we don't have the budget for it. He says, then the state will pay for it. And he went ahead and got rooftop solar installed in the 50,000 houses. Okay. The cost was 50,000 per household, as against a minimum of 2 lakhs to 5 lakhs per household had wires been put in. Plus there'd be a monthly consumption charge. In solar, there's no monthly consumption charge. And he's created his own set of people who install it, maintain it. And when you maintain solar power, you need inverter expertise, you need solar expertise, you need panel expertise, you need fitting guys. The number of jobs that get created, and he's created small-scale skill development centers only for solar power in those regions. It is possible. Now, how does the funding come? Even if you take the deficit, and I mentioned that in the book, just take the deficit that power sector grids have in the country, capitalize it, issue bonds against it, and give it to the banks, who will then give it to entrepreneurs to create miniature clusters of solar power. You will change the way solar power works. The only company that's serious about it today is Tata Power, which has already started working on smart grids because it knows that this change is taking place.
Thanks, Mr. Bhaskar. I would have called you Radhika, but I think you and Mr. Bhaskar are more or less on the same side. So because gender rules, I would have called a woman instead of another person. No. But I'm going to hold you till the last now. Dilip, over to you.
Fascinating book, Bhaskar, and I loved your sort of enthusiastic take, which has changed over the years. Usually book launches like this end up being missing contests as to who knows the author for longer kind of stuff, which I won't enter. But Bhaskar's always had a very febrile and very fecund mind, and he comes up with solutions where people only see problems. And I'm glad that you've done this book. In fact, when you're talking about Kurian, one of the things that struck me was that what he has done with Amul and Gujarat cooperatives has resulted in actually things which we don't sometimes see. The other day I was sitting in on a board meeting of a very large consumer goods company, and a global consultant came and made a presentation on how consumers buy. And he said that the average consumer is definitely not loyal. And she, for example, will buy 7 kinds of soap in a year, 6 kinds of shampoos in a year, and showed us statistics valid for India, which showed how consumer churn is happening all the time. So we went through a range of products because the FMCG company was looking at an acquisition, and we were making some decisions at the board meeting. And there's one product which stood out at the end, which said butter. And it said butter only one. That means only one churn, which means there is no choice. Everybody in this room buys Amul butter. So if you look at what he has created not only jobs for the masses, but he has also ensured that he created a system which understood and exercised its power of monopoly over a massive segment of the market, which I think is a way, if Indian brands are to actually have any power going forward, this is one of the things. But having said that, I'm not quite sure where the milk economy of India is going to head in the next few years. And I'm talking about cow slaughter.
Yes, I mentioned that.
I know you've mentioned it, but just yesterday I was talking to some people who were doing surveys in UP for the elections, and they said that the impossibility of finding people who could run these mini whatever equipment they now are using on the farms, because many farmers are trying not to keep cows or not to keep buffaloes, etc., etc.
Yes.
So I think that what we are seeing today, and it's just an observation based on the energy that this sector could potentially harness and harvest, besides the huge damage to the leather industry, and which is again, and the meat industry, which are both huge export areas. But I see this as one of the things that perhaps you should consider taking off from the
Yes.
book, because given the current, shall I say, mahal of taking decisions, it is unlikely that you will see this virtuous cycle of the fact that you have to end up slaughtering a cow or a buffalo and slaughtering lots of cows and buffaloes if you want to keep that economy churning, is not going to be possible, because the average farmer is going to find it difficult to maintain and retain possession of the animals that he has. So that's one thought I had.
Can I just mention one small thing?
Let him finish,
Okay.
maybe then you can
Yes.
just
Fine.
note it down.
The second thing is that I'm glad you mentioned solar from the point of view of off-the-grid clusters. Some years ago, I think 15 years ago, I was thrown off balance when I saw a prediction by Jack Welch, who was at that time chairman of GE, who said that he saw the future of energy for America and Western Europe as micro nuclear plants which will be housed inside the home. So, and GE actually started working on technology to compress is a wrong word, but nano power plants which could actually function inside each home, which would then prevent the need to have grid losses, construction of grids. And in Europe and America, the biggest issue today is actually renewal of the grids, because all those grids are now aging and they were built at a time of great economic prosperity, and they no longer have the money to actually make those massive grids all over again. So I think that the good thing is that you are predicting a crisis. Not to be cynical and not to reveal my age, I think it's only when you have a crisis that India actually takes a decision which is smart.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that, of course, if there is a crisis in the power sector, then I think a whole bunch of decisions will have to be changed. You speak of drones and you speak of the drone policy, and I think that for what it's worth, Jayant Sinha saw that drones was an area which could be a potential game changer for India, and thought he was doing a good thing for the country by putting together a policy rather than have everything stalled by DGCA and other such extremely bright people who take decisions for us. But I think in general, if one looks at India's software industry, if one looks at Bollywood, if one looks at co-working spaces, etc., India only prospers and grows when there is no regulation in place.
Yes.
Meaning, we are a naturally rule-bending, rule-breaking society. That is in our nature. And I think that every single area where we have actually prospered has had a gap in the policy making and a long enough lead time for the industry to actually, e-commerce is another area, it grew and prospered at a time when regulations haven't come in. I know I'm in the wrong room to say this, but now with the new e-commerce policy, I'm not quite sure where e-commerce in the country will head. Because once you have stifling rules or even any kinds of rules, then there's a bunch of people who have the right to take decisions for you.
And scams.
And scams, of course. But you don't even need scams. The moment you allow the rule makers in, then, of course, Shardul may disagree, but the fact is that the only ones who then prosper are the lawyers. And they have a lot of room to play then, because rules are also made conveniently, shall I say, inaccurate, so that there's lots of room to discuss, debate, and for someone else to decide. The other issue I had on the milk area was that in a world which is going vegan, I'm not quite sure how long milk will last. Because, I'm not sure how many young people are here today, but young people in the droves are sensibly avoiding what their grandparents taught them and missing out on milk, which is anyway nowadays full of hormones and full of all the nasty stuff that you don't want to be imbibing. So, as parents who are careful about what they put into their children's mouths, I think I see a lot of new age parents actually sensibly avoiding overemphasis on milk once the child has been weaned. I'll just stop here because I don't want to say too much at this. I have lots to say, but I'll stop at this point in time. And
You wanted to take that question that he had raised?
Just a small thing about cattle slaughter. You see, the biggest casualty is the farmer. The biggest casualty in the cattle slaughter ban was the farmer who sold his old cattle for 20,000 rupees, added another 20,000 rupees, bought a new cattle. You took away the 20,000. He can't buy the new cattle. And he has extra expenditure on the cattle which he can't sell. Man now must look after, and it doesn't generate income. Part of the farmer crisis is because of this reason.
And the other part of the crisis that the reporter told me yesterday is that now farmers are actually having gaurakshaks to save their crops from the cow.
Yes.
So there's a new generation of employment being generated, which is people midnight watching the crops.
And the second thing I see happening in the cow business is Tamil Nadu rejected the ban, Orissa, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Bengal. Gradually, you'll see over the next 20 years, the entire cattle and milk industry moving to the eastern side. Northeast, Amul was there in Tripura when I was there, and they've started promoting the dairy farm aggressively. NDDB has set up a dairy farm and collection center, and Guwahati, see the entire industry shift. So traditionally, those were Krishna Bhakts who saw Uttar Pradesh and Mathura as the cow center and Dwarka as the other cow center, will see all the mythologies turn upside down because of a stupid decision. Remember when Modi was the chief minister for 20 years, here the largest cow industry, he didn't talk about the cow slaughter ban. Something went wrong.
In any case, your chapter on cow is not really about cows and milk. I think it's a model that you're talking about,
True.
which is farmer first and ground up
Yes.
rather than a top-down policy, planning commission, etc.,
Right.
downwards. So I think the key argument is more of a model, Dilip, rather than precise cows or milk, etc., which is
The only
which
point
definitely
is that
part
when
of-
you bring in, for example, mini combined harvesters, the ground up will change because you will find that your land holdings are not big enough. So the farmer first approach will get altered subtly because you will not be able to sustain the expenditure on or even on the leasing of these equipment. I'm working with a company now which is trying to be the Uber for farm equipment. So on a need basis it arrives at your doorstep. But even there they're saying that the holdings are small. So the farmer first approach will gradually shift. And one of the points that Bhaskar makes in his book about the need to prevent the large scale migration from rural areas is questionable, because what will happen is that if the use of cows for agriculture, for all the basic agricultural things vanishes because it's simply impossible to keep those cows, then you're going to have a change in technology which will lead to other changes. That's my anxiety.
Yeah. So before I give it to Radhika, just one very short comment, which I'm certain you will agree. Uh, Regulations always follow the industries. Anywhere across the world, something happens. There is a market failure sometimes, or there is some tax revenue potential sometimes, and the regulations in case of an industry, they always follow. Likewise for scams, regulations always follow scams. Scamsters will always be one step ahead. Entrepreneurs will always be one step ahead. So I think that's the nature of the beast. Over to you, Radhika. From you, what we would like to know is, like, what did you think about this book when you got it? Why did you think it would be an interesting idea, worth publishing, etc.?
Absolutely. No, I must say that I feel quite misplaced in this panel of Dilip, Gautam, Bhaskar, all experts. But I'll tell you, when the book, Money Control editor got in touch with me, told me, Bhaskar, I of course knew that he was a brilliant journalist, a veteran journalist of over 3 decades. I saw the book proposal, and as a book editor, my first thought when I see a book proposal is it's interesting, but policy is something that salespeople run from.
Allow me to just pause.
Yeah.
So all our young ORF interns and associates and professionals, please listen to her very carefully. This is how your book will be evaluated.
No, so the thing is, what happens is that, policymakers, of course, a lot of times you people are coming, you're experts, what you're talking about, it's research-led, it's extremely important. But what you forget sometimes is the reader. You tend to talk to, a colleague, you tend to talk to a contemporary. So sometimes you need to, you don't have, please don't think that you need to dumb down your content. But what I found in Game India was, it was so rich in anecdote, there were so many stories that you felt like you could really understand that the problems and in consequence the advantages that India possessed. So I mean, you begin the book and you know about this man called Nani Palkhiwala. So for a lot of people who grew up in the 90s and the noughties, they don't really know who that was, and he's a brilliant man, and you start with such anecdotes which are fantastic. They really draw the reader in. So what happens is that you feel such a connect with the book. You feel that you're a shareholder, stakeholder in policy making, which authors usually are unable to do. So I think that is really where I found potential in the book, and I think that's the reason that if you look at the reviews and the press that the book has been getting, journalists think that this book actually talks to people. So I think that is something that policymakers would. I mean, it'd be good if they know that.
So basically, you write your book so that it talks to people. And by the way, your Palkhiwala example, it made me feel very old here. Although I was there only for his second last speech and not the earlier ones.
Yeah.
I was too young for that. But I thought, oh really? This guy is an ancient guy, and so therefore I must be old too. That's what it made me feel.
Now, can I mention one more
Just to
thing?
make you feel younger, I listened to Palkhiwala when his speeches could be contained in the main auditorium of the IIC.
Oh.
There was a time.
I was only
There was
there
a time, my
during the
friend.
There was a time, yes.
Talkatora Stadium.
Yeah, he had
That's where
grown to
I-
that.
Just one more small thing. You see, I was also unhappy about so many little anecdotes I picked up as a journalist, which management schools were not talking about. Like one of the stories was the 25 paisa deposit, which started the first rural bank, which did not have to be nationalized because it was serving the rural area. And it became syndicate bank, which in turn made Dhirubhai Ambani. I mean, a story that has such 25 paisa deposits could create the largest industrialist in India. That's a story which I loved, and management schools don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So just one more question, and then we'll get into another discussion. You say that a lot of jobs will be created in the power sector, in the solar sector, because of the services part. But it will, and it has, made India completely a net importer, not net, I think total importer on the manufacturing side. Do you think there is still scope for India to enter the manufacturing of solar? Or has China walked away with the gravy and it's too late?
Well, there are two parts of solar. One is the panel, and the second is the technology underlying the panel, the inverters, the battery. I can see a lot of battery technologies already coming to India, and people like Amara Raja and Duracell have already started making batteries here. Unfortunately, the government imposes duties when the duties should not have been there. On solar, they put up a crippling 25% safety, what is it called? Safeguard duty. You can't promote solar with this 25% safeguard duty. Obviously, this is being done to protect someone else. Now, you bring in solar power at the volumes that you have in the villages. I can foresee a situation like it happened everywhere in the two-wheelers that the Japanese collaborations came with. Indigenization works in India, and Indians have a way of making sure that they bring in something which is price competitive and quality competitive too. It'll happen here too. And labor is there, which India has an advantage over. You need new skills, whether in battery or in solar or in cleaning or in maintenance or in fitting. So I'm not worried about the jobs. I'm not worried about imports. Imports will take initially, like it happens in any new technology. But allow it to grow.
Okay, one more question, and let's change the areas to innovation. And I think this entire thing of Jugaad, which you guys are another, I think you published 2 books on Jugaad, and maybe third, it's almost like innovation by stealth, or innovation on the sly, or in the shadows, while actually innovation can be the driving agenda, as you mentioned, because of absurd rules. What is this? You are suggesting that we need supervision and punishment for those who break the rules, right? That's your suggestion?
We need incentives for those who
That's right.
do things,
Right.
but severe penalties for those who do not.
Now, innovation is today an equivalent of disruption, as you would agree. When you disrupt, so this thin line between innovation and disruption, and which has now a scalability that has been unimagined, that we could not imagine even a decade ago. How do you balance this thing about innovation, regulation, disruption?
Okay, let me talk about 2 things which are not talked about in the book, but I'll just explain this. We grew marvelously in the IT sector, in software, when suddenly the government brought in an 80 HHC section which allowed for income tax free exports in software. Overnight, the software industry became a laundering machine. You bring in a wrong rule, you convert that innovation into a distortion. The same Keralite who works very, very hard in Dubai, put him in Kerala and he becomes a disruptive. He becomes a unionist. It's not that the man is bad. It's the framework that is wrong, the policy that is wrong. Let me give you another example. In the field of diamonds, I just hinted at diamonds, but I'm not giving the full story of diamonds. It's a very interesting story. It took a long time. But the diamond industry came into existence because the Bears wanted to cripple the banks in Israel which were collateralizing diamonds. So they flooded the industry with the size of diamonds that Israel was using, but they wanted another market for smaller diamonds, and they offered it to India. They didn't expect India to lap it up so well. They did it so well that they became a threat to the Bears. And then the government brought in regulations that you can't import diamonds from anywhere except the Bears. Now, that is where things went wrong. And then, of course, all the finance and the Neo Modis and Mehul Choksi, there's another story behind it which has not come in the media, and it's difficult to write about it because it's a little nebulous. But the way the government framed regulations on a trade which was doing marvelously and had become world number 1 was where it destroyed the trade.
Shardul, can I get you into this? You are one of the people who actually draft laws, policies, or at the back end, or at least study them deeply. Where is the gap that India faces in allowing entrepreneurship to flower drafting laws, rules, and regulations that are become enabling mechanisms rather than constraining as it was in the 70s, and leading to the 21st century entrepreneur. Where is that gap?
I think I just first want to clarify that I don't draft rules. And
Yeah, so I
regulations.
clarified that by saying that you study them and
To study them. I do write law in the sense of part of statutes where I have some degree of expertise, but I'm not. I don't venture to state that I write many laws. I do select kind of laws, and yes, I can also proudly mention that those laws have stood the test of time and they've been justified by court judgments. They have not been found fault in, and that gives a sense of satisfaction. So I did do the Companies Act. My wife did the Competition Act. I did the Coal Mines Act post the license cancellations by the Supreme Court. So yes, there are some laws which I am proud of. Let me now deal with the question of rules and regulations. I think India needs light-handed regulation, but unfortunately what happens is that with light-handed regulations we do get into abuse of gaps very quickly, and then the reaction is essentially one of over-regulation. And that's been a bane. For example, if you look at what happened in Satyam, and then you compare the change of law, it's all aimed at plugging the holes which were discovered in Satyam. That's how the whole regulations vis-a-vis the auditors and how did the auditors allow this kind of scam to happen came up. You'll see new regulation come out when ILFS story is fully done with. You'll see new regulations come out when the whole story of Nirav Modi, it's sort of out there, proved and completely discovered as to what went wrong. Sometimes it's just the individual who distorts the law, and it's not a systemic failure, but sometimes it's a systemic failure and it's sort of abuse which results in the changes in the rules which are outside the periphery of governance. So you distort the law because the governance is weak and you're not really sticking to the basic norms, and you destroy a financial system. Take, for example, what's the primary issue in ILNFS. The zone of infrastructure is a zone where there is very light-handed law, because you are required to do off-balance sheet financing. So you can't be limited to just physical assets on the ground, and therefore it's a place where there is exclusion from the ordinary laws. Now what has happened is, because of this exclusion in the space of infrastructure, and infrastructure finance company is not scrutinized, and it has created more than 350 sub-companies, and each of those companies are borrowing from the parent, and the flows of money which should have come from government, from say road projects or XYZ projects which were needed by this thing, because of the delay, the company has collapsed.
So my question was a little one step
Yeah.
between causation and law.
Yeah.
Does every problem, every cause have to be addressed by a law?
No.
Can't it? I think we have more than enough laws, in my opinion.
I totally agree with you. In fact, that is the bane of the problem, solution issues in India. We try to fix everything by a regulation. We try to fix it as if the law can be sort of hidebound by giving a legislative solution or a rule-based solution. I don't think that's the answer in India. It's more governance, in the sense of the education about governance, that what you can do wrong is hurtful to the system, and therefore rules of behavior rather than rules of rules of performance. It's more on the side of how the mental process should change, instead of having such rules that really distort innovation, distort growth.
So let me question myself and our discussion, and the last question, we'll move on to others now, which is that there is this talk about having a principles-based approach rather than a rules-based approach, right? So when this was being decided in SEBI for one aspect, I think it was mutual funds, if I remember correctly, that we moved to a principles-based rather than a rules-based, when the Bombay International Center report was released. A lot of professionals in the compliance officers in large corporations, etc., their objection was that give us a rule. Don't give us flexibility. Give us a rule. We will follow it to the letter. Now there is this is a psychological flaw, not only among the people who are doing things, but also in the regulatory and lawmaking thinking. Where are we headed in that? Clearly, principles-based approach is a superior approach, but perhaps India is not ready for it.
No, I don't think India is not ready for it. It's the problem is enforcement, problem is punishment. What happens in a rule-based law, you can have a checkbox approach, technical clearance of everything, but the substance and the spirit is sometimes just missing. If you take again the example of ILF, this is a perfect book as far as in terms of compliance. Everything which was required was done, but the spirit was completely missing. And you've recent reports which demonstrate that the auditor was part of the collusion. So if you are really not honest, the question of a principle-based approach will be difficult. Whereas for the normal person who's a compliance officer and who's responsible for checking the boxes and seeing that, look, I am not going wrong in form, that is obviously the preferred route for the guy who's at the bottom end of the ladder. When you move upwards, you are going to have these kind of issues as to how straight do you remain, because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So that's the norm, in the sense that when you go higher, it requires a very rare individual who knows how to hold power. And because it's difficult to hold power and not be corrupted by it, I think the rule-based principle is a safeguard for the lower rung. And that's why the general tendency is no, make a rule. I'll follow the rule as much as I can show technical compliance with the rule. I am safe. I won't be punished.
And then you trap the nation into a mesh of rules. The house is open. Any questions? Just raise your hand. Yes.
My basic point is regarding China. The way China develops the skills of its people, regarding tomorrow's technologies, like in AI, or for example with the electric vehicles and all, India has not been able to do well. India basically does not do the skill work properly. It basically focuses too much on education. While in the education sector it has too many schools, but they are not that developed to deal with the tomorrow's challenges. And students go abroad, they do well. They basically are professors in big university like Harvard, etc. While basically when they come into India, they are not being able to be that successful. Look at Rajan, look at other examples. So what can be done to build on that?
Your education chapter, you want to?
Well, education is a mess in India, primarily because school education has collapsed. In school education, like Shardul says, we've got a rule-based approach. This can be allowed, that can be, this kind of management cannot be allowed. We're not looking at outcomes in schools. We're not looking at outcomes in medical colleges. We have a licensing raj in schools and medical colleges. You need the licensing raj to go away. And you need to evaluate management schools on the inputs they put in and the output of students. You forget the output, you will have corruption.
Bhaskar, if I may just intervene,
Yes.
you have this wonderful line in the book where you say that McKinsey and companies like that find that barely 25% of people who are postgraduates are actually employable.
Yes.
So what starts at the bottom shows up at the top
Yeah.
as a 75% dropout.
Unemployable graduates.
Unemployable graduates, which is frightening.
And there's a second
Law,
Yeah.
which we see in the law, if I get 100 applicants, I can barely appoint 2.
Exactly.
It's worse in law.
In law, it's worse. Let me give you one more example, and I've given the chart there. If you look at the last census, if you put all graduates together, arts, science, commerce, engineering, medicine, everyone together, your total graduate population is just 3.6% of the population, of which at least 50% are not employable. So you and I belong to 1.8%. You can't become a superpower in the world with 1.8%. No way. You need to strengthen school education. You need to de-license school education. You have to focus on outcomes. If the output of schools is good, inputs of colleges will be better. It has to start in schools. That's all I have to say. The issues can be many in education, but I need the school system to be improved first.
Any other question? Yeah.
Hello.
that light. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is Hans from ETV. My question to you, you also talk about the solar power energy, that the solar power capacities that India has. And India also envisages certain eco-friendly targets till the year 2022 of getting 100 gigawatts of solar energy. But the ground reality remains like, especially in agriculture sector, a lot of our farmers are not willing to use solar energy and solar pumps. Like, I'll give you an example. In Uttar Pradesh, the UP government is giving more than 70% subsidies on solar pumps, yet the farmers are not using it. So how would you make them realize that solar energy is actually beneficial for them?
Can I? There are two parts to it. One, when you get free power, why should you invest in a solar pump? Even 25%, why should I pay? If I'm getting free power, I don't want to spend 25%. Point one. Point two, solar pumps is a bad idea. At least in the power system that we have, the grid power, there is a price, even 1 rupee for the unit. I keep the pump on for 4 hours. Solar power is free. I pay 25%, then I leave the pump on for 12 hours. I draw up groundwater resources. It is a dangerous mechanism for agriculture. We have no metering for water, and we're headed for crisis. Water tables in most states have started going down. In Maharashtra, it's such a precipitous fall that we won't have water for drinking at least 5 or 6 districts. So, your solar power and your water policies must be blended. They must go hand in hand. And if you have free power, you will not have solar.
Thanks. Good afternoon, sir. My name is Amya.
He's asking. Yeah, please go on.
Yeah, my name is Amya Kelkar, research assistant at ORF. I just have one question. At the start of your talk, you had basically made a statement that it is crisis which precipitates revolution. And in terms of, say, solar energy, right now scientists are saying we have basically 20 or 30 years before the Earth becomes, well, an unlivable planet or uninhabitable. So don't you think the crisis is here in a way when it comes to our energy use and in the methods in which we're using our energy?
Dilip, would you take that?
I don't think there is a crisis, because that's no crisis. Everybody knows the planet is getting unlivable. Everybody knows the seas are going to be choked fairly soon with plastic. Everybody knows that you're filling chickens and cows with hormones. But there is no crisis, because the crisis only happens when, for example, a state power grid has no power to pay and companies refuse to produce power and supply them with power. Then you'll have rules changing. So unfortunately, human beings are not wired to perceive crisis in the air we breathe, in the water we drink, etc. Because unless there is some kind of an epidemic, and God forbid there is, this planet's unlivability is something that human beings are still loath to concede. And it's a very sad situation. There is a crisis. I don't disagree with you. But I'm saying that the perception of the crisis is inaccurately portrayed in the minds of individuals, customers, consumers, citizens, governments, courts, etc.
I'll just mention one more thing. The crisis is often not even seen. In Maharashtra, when the report on water scarcity, was it Gadgil or who made that report? Yes, when the Maharashtra, that ex-bureaucrat wrote this brilliant report. He pointed that places like Vapi and places like Chiploon, you had processing plants that were taking the effluent and pushing it underground. It's poisoning your water. So till a few thousand people die, you won't even know that the water's got contaminated. Then it's too late. The cost of contaminating water is 100 times more expensive than preventing the contamination. You mean the government does not have input-output ratios? It has.
Sir.
I would like to comment upon your solar policy. Before I do so, let me introduce myself so that we can perspective. I was chairman of Uttarakhand Power Corporation,
Okay.
which you said you talked of Tripura and Uttaranchal is an
Similar.
similar example. It was 2004 to 2007, right? I'm talking, remembering that. There were 243 villages in Uttarakhand, and each were catered by the MRA policy, in that time prevalent good policy. And you'll be surprised that I had to change all 243 villages from the decentralized power to grid-based power. And I'll take a little bit of time because it is a very important
we
point.
won't have much
I
time.
know, I'll just cover on that. It has you have talked of Tripura as an example of decentralized power. Let me tell you, the Secretary MNRE, one Mr. Subramaniam, used to have a very popular quote: "We are trying to sell the costliest power to the poorest man of this country." When we are talking of decentralized.
So you have anything for the book?
Yeah.
You can just
No,
come
I'm
to it.
talking of that.
Yeah, let's
So
move to that.
when you cover on that solar, you need to have a discussion on solar into two portions. One decentralized, like Tripura example, and other large power stations in this part. You will find picture is slightly different. I will add to that in the examples. Right? One. Second is, luckily we have Mr. Rajiv Gupta. He was secretary to Government of India in Ministry of Defence before retired. I took that is the last posting, and I had the.
Sir, I'm very sorry. I will have to stop you, or you come to what you want to say.
So he was. I have been talking of animal husbandry and
Yeah.
cow.
No, you come to the
And-
question, sir. Please. Please.
No,
go
I
on.
am telling. I would like to supplement on that. I slightly have my difference of opinion on.
I think
the
where he's
use
coming
of-
from is the administrative part. You are approaching the field as a scholar, as
And
an,
again-
as an
again-
observer, as a journalist.
again-
He is giving you ground that exactly what has happened at the executive officer, grid and farm and district level. I
Gautam,
think
one
that is
small
what you're
thing.
trying.
I would
One small
like
thing.
to add on to you after the discussions.
Maybe we can have it over,
We can have a
over
separate
tea.
discussion.
And-
Right? Only one small thing I'd like to mention is 2004-2007, a solar power was 2.5 times to 3 times more expensive than it is today. The pricing have changed. Batteries are going to increase 18 times more. Battery prices have already fallen by 70% since then. That's it.
I am aware of the data. I think this is the subject which 2 or
चाय
3 of us.
ये चाय पे चर्चा कर लेंगे इसमें.
Yeah.
Any other question? Yes, sir.
You will talk of animal husbandry.
Good afternoon.
Huh?
Thank you so much, Mr. Bhaskar. My question is, see, some of these strategic advantages, what you are highlighting in your book, some action has already been taken by the government. Like, for example, when you talked of the solar, this thing, see, the government worked out investment in solar plants. They did it with basically with the fixed panels. They have not talked of the solar panels. Similarly, you talked of the coastline. Now they are talking of the Sagarmala.
Exactly.
Now I would like, for the benefit of the audience and for our own benefit, have you covered this? That how is the government? What action has it taken? What has it taken? How do they stand as of now with
I have
respect to
given
your
data.
vision?
I have given data on how the waterways are being developed. I have given data on what the government has done, and I've also said what more needs to be done.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Yash. I'm working at ORF, student of law. So my first question is, we've always known that we've had a 7,500 long kilometers coastline. My point is, why do we need to relook at it? Because in terms of when you say it's a strategic advantage, I've heard Ambassador Parthasarathi say 5 years ago that because of the focus on the northern and the northwestern side of our borders, we haven't really been able to develop in terms of our navy, its budget, the coast guard, etc. And because our prime focus in the defense remains there, our attention remains there, we've lost what we've historically really enriched in terms of trade and sea lanes of communication. So one, what are the constraints in terms of defense and security to our coastline? And second, I would want to know that what is your opinion on interlinking of rivers and linking the north and the northeast with the south and the southwest? west of India, and your interlinking river project, wherein, and is it sustainable? Do you commend that India should go ahead with an interlinking so that we merge the dry and the not so dry areas? Thank you.
So he's using strategic part
Can-
of India as part of what you are describing as strategy
Correct.
in economic matters.
Point one. The myth that defense security will be affected if you have exploitation of coast is a myth. Go to countries like the UK, go to Portsmouth, go to Glasgow, see the leisure boats bobbing up and down near the naval frigates. It's a small island, it has a small coastline. When your coast is populated, the navy becomes more alert. An empty coastline makes the guard also sleep. You need to have a system where leisure boats move around. You need commerce, romance, lifestyles around the coasts which are vibrant around the world. At least 8 billion pounds. It was 4 billion pounds, which I mentioned in the book, but after I wrote the book, I found that the figures gone much higher. Comes from coast-based activities, leisure activities in the UK. It's a small coastline. India has a phenomenal amount. We've ignored that. The second thing is that over the years, for centuries, Indians, and I've mentioned that in the book, have culturally been scared of the sea. You were not allowed to cross the sea and go overseas. You came back from overseas, Shuddhikaran karo, you're inauspicious now. Even when Ram had to go to get his wife, when he reached Kanyakumari, he didn't take a boat, he had to build a bridge. Culturally, we've been scared of the sea. And as many Navy people say, for 6 decades, you had governments that were not from coastal areas. As they say, they had sea blindness. And it's only now that we're changing and we've realized the potential the seas have, coastal transportation has, coast-based businesses have, coast-based industries have. That is a change that's taking place for the good. That's strategic. Take any other area, whether it's the northeast. For the first time, we're talking Chittagong as a major transportation hub, even to reach the northeast. That concept is changing. The chicken's neck is a physical reality. So again, don't get bogged down by traditional theories. You have to look at new theories.
See, I'm sorry I missed the initial presentation part, but I heard some discussion about slaughterhouses and the economy, farmers' economy being affected because of the ban. See, I mean, the law of prevention of cow slaughter, in some way or the other, has been there since 1955.
Yes.
I mean, it was total ban, partial ban earlier, the total ban in most of the states, northern states especially, after, let's say, 2000 or around that time. Now, I mean, you can't justify breach of law. I mean, whatever was happening earlier was basically violation of law, rampant violation of law. I mean, even if it was adding to the economy of the farmer. See, the whole thing got disrupted because of a number of factors. We destroyed the gosher lands, then we destroyed the breed also by getting the Holstein Friesian and the Jersey, and then their bulls were of no use. It's a big topic, but all I want to say is that the cow is not something which cannot be handled. While we spend about 70,000 crores of rupees as subsidy on urea and other things, probably we can divert 20,000 towards proper usage of cow and its progeny. It will be much better. So it said, I mean, I'll read your book and then comment on that.
Read the book and then we'll discuss.
Yes, we'll discuss on that.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm P. Sharma from Bureau of Indian Standards. I just, sir, I am affectionate with the sir regarding the rules and regulations that was discussed sometime before. So you are having all types of developments to be taken place in the coming, and they are already in the, so the regulations or innovations or whatever we are speaking, are you find them competent in the Indian scenario? Because a recent case of power factory itself, a quashing of the order of RBI or that circular, that is not a case of disruption.
No, I have not referred to that in the book.
No, but he's making a general point that you're talking about the IBC and the RBI regulation, which said that you don't need, the banks are not bound to
Yes.
put the to initiate the IBC, right? Or within those 180 days.
Whether regulations are put in a very good way so that we can work on those.
So allow me to.
developments.
So I think this is not an issue of regulation. This is an issue of the judiciary extending its brief.
Yes.
And I do believe it. I agree with you. This is a wrong law. I think what RBI had done was right.
No, that's
But
true.
now that the judiciary has decided, Supreme Court has decided that this is the right way, perhaps there will be an appeal, or there will. I think a changed regulation is already on the website. But I do believe, in general,
Yes, I'm talking
in general, law making, policy making is done on whims and interests and political leanings rather than on hardcore data or trying to fix a market imperfection or market failure. I believe the role of policy making or law making comes only when there is a visible, proven with data market failure. That's when the government needs to enter. Otherwise, I believe government needs to generally stay away.
So such developments in the book, whatever in the various sectors, will those regulations will help or it will needs amendments?
I
or it
think
will-
you are now talking beyond the book, so
I'm not talking
yeah,
regulation,
yeah.
I'm talking strategy.
It
more
just-
important.
it just came as an aside.
To survival of the fittest. That is more important. The regulations should be sound enough.
Any other questions? Closing remarks?
I would say that as Bhaskar's book is designed to talk of what the future could potentially be, the messages to me sound very clear. That look at opportunities where we have always ignored them. Look at opportunities even in the fact that if we try and tackle, for example, the human advantage which we talk about, I'm not quite sure where the human advantage can be encashed given the quality of the human that we have today, given the fact that we have a backload of education at the basic level which has been slow in responding to the needs of the market, and given the fact that the world of the future, for those who are paying attention to it, assumes that there will be less humans, at least in the developed parts of the world. And most technologies that are coming up are actually ignoring the numbers as a factor and looking at issues to do with how to cope with lower numbers, which is a problem that many other economies are facing. So I'd say that Bhaskar's is a very optimistic book. And one of the things that we sorely miss in this country is aggressive optimism. So I'd say kudos Bhaskar for having made us all feel that we still have a fighting chance, despite a government that attempts to get faster and faster at making regulations and stifling us as soon as it can. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this was really illuminating, and I hope you will all go out, buy the book, get it signed, and
No
I
commercial
actually-
pitches, please.
No, and I actually encourage you to read it, go through it, and implement these things in whichever way possible, because I think that is the most important thing. If it can actually get you to think, get you to discuss, debate, and bring about change.
Okay, so now that the floor is back to me, I have two criticisms. The first is, I think, Bhaskar, you are behaving, there is a closet socialist hiding inside you somewhere. There is I sense an intellectual confusion, and maybe I have read you wrong, or maybe you can clarify. So on page 69, you say that when it comes to financing the solar part, the banks can receive financing from an arm of the government and hand it over to private sector because public sector is not good enough and has not done enough or whatever. Essentially what you're saying is public sector is bad here, but as far as money goes, we don't mind public sector money, particularly if it is subsidized by the government. The government subsidies in XYZ area can go and fund these ventures to the private sector. But on the innovation side, you said some of the most innovative jobs will come in through tourism. The market will require this, a market will do this, and the entire, your focus is very heavily market. I don't know where you stand on these 2 points. Further, when you say that the funds that will be freed due to subsidies can be given to these people, why? If money is available with the government, it might want to give it to defense production. It might want to give it for universal basic income. It might want to do it in poverty reduction. So I'm a little confused on your intellectual where you are coming from. Are you with the market or are you against the market?
The suggestion I made was of financing the power sector. Since the power grids are in trouble, I was suggesting that you capitalize the losses for 10 years, create a separate fund for power. Since the government can't handle the retail end and promote entrepreneurship, transfer the funds like NABARD is to the private sector, and the private sector will finance the retailers in a plan that they know how to recover the money. So there's no confusion there. The funds have to come out from unlocking an existing power infrastructure to creating a new power infrastructure. That's the reason why. So if it's government property, the money will have to be government. The government has to give the money out, but it can't give the money out the way it is giving out. So you have to work through the private sector banks, which have been better users of money, if you look at the NPA ratios, than the public sector banks. Point.
So why shouldn't it be market based? Let the commercial banks come. Why do you want the government subsidies to go into government banks and to give it back into this?
No, to break this Gordian knot, he's okay with government money as long as it's lent through private arms.
Okay.
Absolutely, because the funds are locked up with the government assets. The assets are government owned.
Okay, my last point is this, that on page 62, those of you who buy this book, you must read the page 62 where he talks about, there is a beautiful synopsis of the 26th Amendment on privy purses. It was hugely educative for me, and in 3 paragraphs, you have encapsulated those things, which has nothing to do with the book. I mean, it's just a passing reference. I think you got carried away. Maybe that's your next book. You started enjoying it so much. So in 3 paragraphs, he has brilliantly and very beautifully compressed something. This is just an aside. We will now launch the book.
Please.